Okay, everyone, it's 1:30, and this is the February 12th, 2020 meeting of the Planning Commission. Everyone, please silence your cell phones. Maybe we have the roll call, please.
Commissioner Donohue?
Present.
Commissioner Irvin?
Present.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Present.
Commissioner Lewin?
Present.
Commissioner Song?
Present.
And Vice Chair Maluzzi.
Here.
Chair Wormick is excused. We have a quorum.
May we have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Mr. Vice Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, February the 6th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Is there an issue of a continuance, perhaps?
There is. Under the acceptance of the agenda, the applicant for item 4B, the Village Pub, has requested a 2-week continuance. In your vote for the acceptance of the agenda, if you would please note that that item will be continued to February the 26th.
Okay, with that continuance, is there a motion to accept the agenda?
I move to accept the agenda as amended by staff.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good. So, this time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on the consent calendar, non-public hearing items, and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Comments on public hearing items 2A and 2B may be made at the time the item is presented. Please note that the Planning Commission is prohibited from taking action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes is allowed for each speaker. So if you wish to speak on items 1A, 4A, 4B, or 5A, please come forward at this time, as these are non-public hearing items. Although item 4B has been continued, if you came to speak on this item, you may do so now or wait until the item is back on the agenda. So, do we have anyone who would like to come forward and speak? You have 3 minutes. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Robert Bergerman, and I work at La Serena Villas at 339 South Bellardo Road in Palm Springs. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here on behalf of my employer, Lars Wiklund, my colleagues, and guests to comment on item 4B, the Village Pub's request for modification of its land use permit to allow for extended hours in outside amplified music. For almost 20 years, Mr. Wiklund has invested millions of dollars in boutique hotels in the heart of downtown Palm Springs. Besides the landmarked historic Del Marcos, we operate the 350 Hotel and the luxurious La Serena Villas. At all of our 3 properties over the years that I've worked for the company, we have received numerous, multiple, and ongoing complaints regarding the amplified music at the Village Pub. We have called both management at the restaurant as well as the non-emergency hotline with very limited success. Managers have frequently blamed outside promoters for the problem or have said they will turn down the music, but frequently this has not been the case. Calls to the hotline have also had a limited impact as well, since our police department is occupied with higher priority items. We have also had to deal with the disorderly conduct and the noise of drunken patrons who parked on Baristo or in the historic Robinson's building parking lot when the pub closes at its current time. The proposed extension would exacerbate both of these problems, leading to more guest complaints at all of our properties. We recognize that one of the benefits of our downtown location is the vibrant restaurants and nightlife on Palm Canyon. However, based on our previous experience with this neighbor, we vehemently oppose any extension of the hours, especially and particularly for amplified music. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Please come forward. You, sir, are you going to speak? All right, very good. All right, seeing none, we are going to move on. Yes, Mr. Hirschbein.
Yeah, I actually think that's a very relevant comment, but I'm afraid that 2 weeks from now or whenever this item comes before us again, we might not have that fresh in our minds or in our minds.
Yeah, I would
at all.
encourage him to come back and
I would
repeat what
encourage
he
you
had
to
to
come
say.
back, but also,
I suspect Mr. Vicklin will ask me to return.
okay, is there a way that we can sort of bring that comment into the staff report in 2 weeks?
Sure, we would be happy to, and we will work with the speaker. If there's any written comments that they would like to provide, we'll make sure that's included in your backup materials as well.
Thank you.
All right. Item 2A, Brandon Mckerlie on behalf of Parker Palm Springs.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes.
Before we move into that, we have the consent calendar.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to accept the consent calendar?
So moved.
And we will note
Oh,
that...
also the minutes.
Yeah, we will note that Mr. Irvin and Mr. Lewin will abstain from those minutes as they were not present at those meetings.
Actually, I have several revisions that I already submitted on regarding the January 8th agenda. So I'm sure those will be reviewed with the video and then entered.
Yes, they will.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
So is there a motion to accept the consent
My
calendar?
motion will be to accept the consent calendar with respect to the minutes, also amending with the amendments to the minutes as stated by Commissioner Maruzzi.
Is there a second? Commissioner Hirschbein, please vote. Motion passes. Now we're going to continue to the public hearings. Item 2A. Brandon Mckerlie on behalf of Parker Palm Springs for an amendment to Plan Development District 58. Staff report, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As introduced, this is a proposed project for Parker Palm Springs to construct a 32 hotel unit addition, accessory uses, as well as an amendment to the existing Plan Development District. For those who are not familiar with this project, the project site is located at the northeast corner of East Palm Canyon Drive and South Cherokee Way. The total size of the Parker property is 13.45 acres. The property currently has 147 hotel rooms and 154 off-street parking spaces. The general plan land use designation of the properties is a tourist resort commercial, which is intended for resort hotel and associated commercial uses. And the zone designation of the properties actually consists of PDD 58, which was adopted back in 1975, and then also R3, which is a multifamily residential and hotel zone. The proposed project takes place in the 3.7 acre portion of the property, which is located at the corner of South Cherokee and East Seven Lakes Drive, and it is bounded by South Linden, East Seven Lakes, and South Cherokee. The project site currently has an open turf space, and the perimeter of the project site is landscaped with mature ficus hedges. And the area also includes a paved surface, which is utilized for the loading and also parking. And these are the images of the site as currently exists. The project is called the Parker Hall, just to differentiate from the existing Parker Palm Springs. The proposed project is a 32 hotel unit addition with accessory uses, and the purpose of this project is to create a facility that can accommodate activities that currently takes place outdoor. And the Parker Palm Springs, which is existing, and the new project, the Parker Hall, although these two developments are owned by the same entity, it's going to be subject to different operation. The Parker Hall will not be open to the public. It's going to be only accessible to the guests who are going to be staying at the Parker Hotel and their guests for special events. The guest is going to be 20 years and older, and the facility will have an attached kitchen facility for simple food preparation, which is not intended for a large-scale food production. The project also will accommodate a space outdoor, which may be utilized for special events for a maximum of 90 people. And when someone proposes or utilize a property for a special event, the business requires the estate to be completely bought out. And there will be no pool parties and no outdoor sound amplification. As you may recall, this project was reviewed by the Planning Commission on January 8th. At the meeting, the Planning Commission determined that obtaining some community comments and input and incorporating the comments and ideas in the design, the project design will be desirable and appropriate. And on January 21st, the applicant held a community outreach meeting at Parker Palm Springs. And at the meeting, the applicant received multiple comments from the attendees. And these comments include insufficient employee parking, a 30-foot building height, the potential negative traffic impact in the South Linden Way, and the participant expressed that the relocation of the proposed entrance on the South Linden Way to be relocated to South Cherokee. And again, employee street parking and truck loading on South Cherokee Way, and vehicular circulation associated with valet parking, and the glare created by the vehicle headlights towards the Canyon Sands community were also presented to the applicant. And based on these comments and concerns, applicant made the revisions to the original development plans. This is a proposed site plan. It's being revised. The previously proposed entrance on the South Linden Way has been relocated to East Seven Lakes Drive, which is approximately 51 feet away from this street intersection. And there will be detached buildings and the parking lots on the west and east side. The applicant has increased the amount of off-street parking spaces slightly. And this is the design, which incorporates Art Deco architectural elements. This is the view of the new development taken from the South Linden Way elevation. And this is a view from the Cherokee Way, East Seven Lakes on the east side, and again, East Seven Lakes on the west side. And this is the view shed and the sightlines analysis that the applicant provided previously to show how the project will impact adjacent Canyon Sands community in terms of building height. This is a sightline study taken from South Linden Way, Unit A, B, and C. And this is for D and E. And this is the anticipated view obstruction created by the new project. The project proposes a landscape design which incorporates different types of spaces within the site, secret garden, gathering area, cactus garden, and so forth, to provide a unique experience for those who visit. And this is a proposed the landscape design with planting materials The plan also includes a proposed hardscape as well. And these are the renderings provided by the applicant. Zoning analysis. The proposed project generally conforms to the development standards. When staff was preparing the report and conducting a zoning analysis, the rear yard setback was actually taken from the project boundary. However, per zoning code, the rear yard setback should be taken from the property line. And based on the measurement that's taken from the property line, the rear yard setback is actually 275 feet, and which conforms to the zoning requirement. So I'd like to point that out. There are a few things that are coming up as an issue. The proposed driveway width for the west and east parking lot, right now 24 feet is being proposed. However, according to the zoning code, when there are double rows of parking spaces, the driveway width needs to be increased to 26 feet. Street parking. After revising the plan, actually just looking at the new development portion only, the required parking space is 50, whereas 51 spaces are provided. However, when the Park of Palm Springs are full, the entire property is analyzed, the parking is deficient. And applicant did submit a specific parking plan to address off-site parking issues. And the proposed specific parking plan proposes a use of valet parking, which the business currently provides, and the valet parking will allow the tandem parking, which allows the accommodation of 153 additional vehicles. In addition to the tandem parking, the applicant is proposing to provide training to the employees, specific valet training, to maximize efficiency of valet parking. As a part of the project, amendment to the existing PDD 58 is being proposed. As you see on the screen, the property has a building that crosses over two different land use designation areas. And an amendment to Plan Development District will rectify this issue. And with the approval of this project, the entire Park of Palm Springs and Parker Hall, everything will be under Plan Development District number 58. The issues, as I mentioned earlier, the proposed driveway widths of the west-east parking lot do not conform to the planning services zoning requirements. And also, the plans do not provide architectural details for accessory structures, and also on-site parking is not conforming to the zoning requirements when it's viewed as an entire property. And the off-street parking requires approval of a specific parking plan. And also, project proposes a compact parking spaces, which require planning commission approval. Based on the information provided, staff finds that the proposed project is consistent with the goals and objectives of the general plan and generally conforms to the applicable development standards for planned development districts. The site is adequate in size and shape and in the setting to accommodate the proposed project. And based on the submitted noise study and traffic letter, the anticipated noise generated by the project conforms to the maximum allowable noise levels that are stipulated in the city's municipal code, noise ordinance to be more specific. And anticipated traffic impact does not meet the threshold of a significant impact. Again, this is based on the study that's provided by a traffic engineer. And based on these findings, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the project to the City Council, subject to conditions of approval, which are included in Exhibit A of the report. And this concludes the staff presentation, and applicant would like to provide a presentation as well.
Ms. Kikuchi,
Yes.
could you, for the benefit of the public and the commission, put up the plan that shows the new entrance on Seven Lakes and just point that out? I don't know if you have a pointer or there's some way that you could
Okay, sure.
indicate there's a larger plan that shows where it's moved from.
We also have that in our presentation, if that's helpful.
You do?
Oh, you do? Okay.
Okay, if it's in your presentation, then, so I guess we'll wait and have questions for staff following the applicant's presentation. Is that, Ms. Kikuchi, what you were recommending?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's what she's recommending. I think we'll go with that. And then we'll have questions for staff and the applicant.
Hello, my name is Michael McDonald. I'm joined by my colleague Brian Libet. We are the architects for the project called Parker Hall. Thank you for having us back, and thank you to Noriko for the introduction. When we last presented to the Planning Commission in January, we gave an overview of the project and its goals. In response to discussions with neighbors and comments provided to the Parker, we have made some significant adjustments to the project that we are excited to present. The adjustments seek to address all of the concerns we have heard to ensure the project serves as an asset to the Palm Springs community. I'd like to give an overview of what we'll show today. We will briefly review the existing Parker Palm Springs and the concept for Parker Hall. We'll explain the extensive efforts that have taken place since we last presented. We'll show a new entrance location. We'll explain additional parking provided and the plan to mitigate parking issues. We have a revised traffic assessment to present, and we'll reconfirm how hedges will hide the proposed resort from public view. As a reminder, the Parker was created in 2003 as the first five-star resort in the city of Palm Springs. The resort has helped to establish the current popularity of Palm Springs as a destination for great design. The Parker has played a central role within the Palm Springs cultural community, including its hosting of events such as many events within Modernism Week. As we described previously, Parker Hall's design is inspired by the Ship of the Desert, a house in a streamlined modern style, which is shown on the left, that predates Palm Springs' famous mid-century modern style. We designed the primary hotel building with a nod to this inspiration. The building is within Palm Springs' allowable heights and uses parapets on all sides of the building to visually and acoustically shield needed mechanical equipment. Since we last presented, the Parker has met with community groups from the Oasis, Seven Lakes, and Canyon Sands on 3 separate occasions, and with planning staff in attendance at the January 21st meeting. Throughout these meetings, the Parker has worked to clarify questions about Parker Hall and work collaboratively to find solutions to concerns that were communicated. We have commissioned a more in-depth parking plan to address concerns and provided a more detailed traffic analysis. Based on neighbor input, staff feedback, and consultation with traffic professionals, we have moved the resort entrance off Linden Way. Also based on feedback and further engagement of parking professionals, we have increased on-site parking and submitted a new parking plan to the city. All of these items were updated and submitted to the planning department on January 29th. To reorient you, the area we are talking about is the back 4 acres, 3.7 actually, of the Parker property. This area is currently made up of turf fields that are used for large-scale events and a service yard that is used for commercial deliveries and staging. We have heard the concerns related to these existing uses and activities in the area. This is the old layout from January. Building Parker Hall would eliminate the ability to host large outdoor events or stage equipment from Linden Way by replacing the current large lawns with a small luxury resort at a domestic scale. As a reminder, Palm Springs development standards would support large hotel buildings with 157 rooms on this site. Instead, our project proposes only 32 rooms. We also heard concerns about the potential of guest traffic on Linden Way, which you can see in the old scheme on the right with the red arrows from our previous resort layout. After additional community outreach with neighbors from all 3 surrounding communities, we have modified the project to utilize an entrance from Seven Lakes Drive. We have made this change as an effort to fully address concerns that we have heard about potential impacts on Linden Way. As a result of this change, we do not expect the project to produce additional traffic, guest parking, or staff parking on Linden Way. Here's what that change looked like in terms of guest circulation. The previous layout is on the left. The proposed layout on the right shows how guests will enter and leave from Seven Lakes Drive to Cherokee Way avoiding Linden Way entirely. The driveway on Seven Lakes Drive is located 51 feet from Linden Way in accordance with Palm Springs zoning code in order to ensure the safety of drivers entering and exiting. Additionally, the hedge at the corner at Linden Way is cut back into the Parker property in order to provide visibility for drivers between Linden Way and Seven Lakes Drive. This modification will also mean that the valet service will avoid Linden Way by entering and exiting on Seven Lakes Drive. The Parker made this major change to the project to address concerns about impacts to Linden Way. Much like other members in the community, the Parker is concerned about vehicular safety and speeding in the area as this relates to the welfare of our guests, employees, and our neighbors. This is an existing issue that is not related to our project, but the Parker asked that we be included in conversations with the city when this issue is studied within the community. We also heard some concerns about the possibility of traffic generated from the project. Our traffic consultant did an additional study based on our revisions and took more detailed project data. Their assessment is that the project will generate no more than 13 total trips per hour during the PM peak, and that is only when the Parker Hall is fully booked. As a reminder, because of the revision to the layout, none of these trips will occur on Linden Way. In response to concerns over available parking, we have added an additional 3 parking spots for Parker Hall to exceed zoning code requirements. Using relevant standards, we expect to have an excess of 10 parking spaces beyond what will be used by Parker Hall. By the way, and because there was some confusion last time, we want to reiterate that there will be no restaurant within Parker Hall. Food service provided will be, for guests only. Additionally, our parking consultant looked at how to improve on-site parking at the existing Parker Palm Springs Resort to address comments we heard about parking on Cherokee Way. They proposed a new specific parking plan to maximize on-site parking and minimize parking need. This slide shows opportunities to accommodate additional vehicles at Parker Palm Springs by introducing more compact on-site valet parking methods than are used currently. To remind everyone about the small scale of the project, the buildings on site are 1- and 2-story and all within Palm Springs allowable heights. These buildings will be fully screened by a 20-foot hedge, which you can see bounding the resort in this artistic rendering. This sightline diagram shows the location of the hedge and how it screens Parker Hall from neighbors. As a note, existing hedges on site were recently trimmed to promote plant health, and moving forward, these will be maintained at approximately 20 feet to address feedback we received. With regard to noise, we wanted to refresh your memory that the Parker has provided a sound study to confirm that the small residential scale of the resort will not have a significant impact on neighbors. The Parker has provided significant efforts to meet with neighbors and adjust the project to resolve concerns that were communicated over the past month. We believe that Parker Hall will provide a great benefit to the Palm Springs community. Approval of Parker Hall will lock in the Parker property as a small-scale luxury resort where other landowners might have sought to maximize scale and units. Thank you for your time, and we welcome your questions. Your recommendation for approval today is critical to keeping this exciting project on track, and we humbly ask you for your support.
Thank you. Have a seat, and we're going to have questions of staff from the commission. Who would like to start out? Yeah, we're going to go back to staff questions now, and then we can ask applicant questions. So do we have, yes, Commissioner Song.
Hi, Noriko. Question on the parking, by having the tandem design, you mentioned that there's an additional 157 spaces. Is that will be on top of the 205 that they already have or planned for to have, correct?
Yes, that's going to be, the 153 spaces will be on top of the 200, I'm sorry.
205?
Yes. Go back to the slides. Yes, the information that's provided in the table in the staff report does not include the tandem parking spaces.
Okay, very good. And then the second question is, when it comes to Seven Lakes or Linden Way, because of the 20-foot hedge, is there a requirement on parkway improvements that's part of the city in which how the sidewalk and landscape is to be addressed?
I can address that if you'd like. So we do have some sightline standards that we try to impose Once the precise grading plans and improvement plans have been submitted, in some of our conditions, it might say that they can't plant any large trees or large site obstructing types of improvements at any driveway or intersection. So we'll have to look at that when we have those technical drawings submitted to us. Right now, it's kind of hard to tell how wide those driveway approaches, what they would look like in the real world out there without having those technical drawings. But the wider the approach gets, the easier it is to, those sight lines are easier to accommodate, so.
And in addition to that, for example, the relationship of the 20-foot hedges in relationship to the curb, do we have any requirement? For example, when we have a 5-foot wall, 6-foot wall, 3-foot wall, we have a certain distance from where the face of curb needs to be.
Correct.
But do we have any requirements when it, obviously 5-foot sidewalk, and then at what point can a vertical hedge or edge be built?
It's going to be based on our site design, and we
Okay.
actually have a standard drawing for that, and it's based on miles per hour, the width of the street, the distance, and whether or not that calculation has been done, I'm not sure. I have not seen those technical drawings from them at this point. Right now, it's just a site plan.
Okay, and being the fact that this is a residential area, not a major thoroughfare or arterial street.
Correct. Then
Yeah.
those site distances end up being a little shorter than they were if this was exiting out onto a major arterial.
Okay,
And then on the corner of Linden and Seven Lakes, there is a corner cutback
Right.
that's required for that type of thing, but their driveway that they're proposing is at our minimum standard for the bay entrance as it relates to an intersecting street. So right now, that all meets our requirement. Whether or not the site distance meets it, we'll have to see that when we get the technical drawings.
okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Donohue?
With respect to you talk about the two driveways into parking not meeting code with respect to width. Has the applicant agreed to widen those two driveways into the parking to the 26 feet as required by the code?
It is staff's understanding that applicant is willing to make those adjustments to bring the project up to code requirement.
And with respect to the new driveway that goes from Seven Lakes into the entrance of the main building, how wide is that proposed to be? And does that have a code requirement attached to it?
Could
If
you bring the image up so we can?
Yes, I have to contact the control room, actually. Thank you. Yes, the driveway width does conform to the code requirement.
It does. And how far is the driveway, is the east line of the driveway from the street, from the curb in the street? I'm trying to get a sense of how close it is to the property, how close that driveway is going to be to the property line.
Can answer it if you want. So based on our standards for the city, the closest that a bay can be to that intersecting street. So if you were to take the west property line of Linden Way, the closest that the driveway can be to the driveway's east property line
Right.
is a minimum of 50 feet, and they're right at 50
They're
feet
right,
right now.
so they're right at 50 feet, so
Yeah.
it's 50 feet. With respect to the entryway, there was some comment from the neighborhood about the entryway being too close to the intersection of East Lakes and Linden. I think it's 50 feet from the intersection, and someone was suggesting it ought to be 100. Is there is there an engineering requirement or a traffic requirement with respect to where the entrance has to be in relationship to the corner?
No, there's not. If this was, say, directly across the street from another driveway entrance, we'd want to see those driveway entrances lined up, if at all possible. Otherwise, it's just a minimum standard from intersecting streets.
And as I noticed, the other side of East Lakes is nothing but a wall and landscaping, basically.
Correct.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Hirschmein.
Yeah, Rick, I have two questions. Visually, I was not following the questioning line from Commissioner Song, so I was wondering if just visually you could help me out as what those parameters are. And the second question I have is, looking at that entrance sequence as a car would pull in off of Seven Lakes, either making a left turn coming in from Gene Autry or a right turn coming in from Cherokee, it looks rather like a bunch of sharp S-turns to me that look kind of awkward. In your estimation, I mean, you're much more familiar with traffic patterns than I would be. Does that appear to be the case to you, that it's a little bit of a whipsaw going around there?
It does appear to be a little sharp if you were to pull in off of Seven Lakes Drive. We haven't seen the technical drawings for the turning movements to see if that would accommodate not just regular cars, but also emergency vehicles. So that's yet to be seen. There may need to be an adjustment there on that width or that radii.
Let me follow up on that. And if that were an issue, would it improve the situation if that driveway was moved further to the west?
I don't know that it would improve it. The area that, where's the pointer at? Is that this one?
Yeah.
So the part that's going to be the most difficult to determine on turning movements is this radius right here as it comes out. Moving this driveway down here really isn't going to make that much of a difference. It's this turn around this corner. That's the part that we don't know yet.
And what would you have to do to alleviate that? Would you have to relocate the kitchen, or what would you have to do to alleviate that?
I'm not sure. They might just make that radius a little tighter or make the outside one a little bit bigger. Not sure. I think there's some small adjustments in there that could be made to make that work and really not move too much around.
But moving the driveway to the west doesn't help.
It doesn't really help much, no.
Okay, so my first question about Commissioner Song's, I just couldn't get a visual on
Sure.
what the issue was and how you talked about it.
So this property line right here, which is the west property line of Linden,
Yeah.
our code, the way that it reads, is from this property line, this direction, from an intersection, the closest that this bay parking can be, per our standard, is 50 feet.
Bay parking is where?
Bay parking is also the same language used for as a driveway entrance.
Oh, no, I got that, but she was talking about a hedge and a height and 5 feet.
Oh, the sight distance window. So this area here, so next to each side of the driveway, there is a sight distance. So if a car comes up, stops here, how far can they see down this
Got it.
direction?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Song?
And Rick, the second part of our discussion that we're having is actually, if you look at the face of curve on Seven Lake Drive, that seems to show an 8-foot walkway, 6-foot or 8-foot walkway. It doesn't look like 5 feet. And then from there, the 20-foot hedge begins. If you were to cut a section through that.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. So on a residential zone, if we were to build a wall, a low wall, there's a certain distance requirement that you have to be from the
Correct.
face of the curb.
So for a physical wall, a concrete wall or a fence, on the property line, they're allowed to be 4.5 feet high.
Correct.
If they want to go 5 feet high, it has to be 5 feet further back.
Okay.
6 feet high, 25 feet back. Okay, that's for a wall. There are no rules for hedges.
Got it.
Commissioner Lewin?
Thank you, sir. I just had one question with regard to the driveway widths. In the staff's recommendation, is it already included that they would be conforming to the fire department's request, or is it something that we would have to add in addition to your details?
Yes, the width requirement is actually was conducted in accordance with the zoning regulations. And obviously, the project does have to conform to the fire department regulations. Staff included conditions of approval in Exhibit A which says the off-street parking configurations need to meet zoning and the fire department regulations. And once the project goes into plan check review by the fire department will conduct their own review as well.
Terrific, thank you. That was my only question.
Oh, Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yeah, I have one more question. Sorry, thanks. So, and this is also Rick directed. So when a guest comes in and pulls in off of Seven Lakes and makes that S turn and then pulls up in front of the Parker Hall building, and then the valet guy comes and takes it away, he has to make a U-turn to go back out, to go around to the parking way over on the west side. Is that motor court in front of the building wide enough to make a U-turn?
It's difficult to see what the dimensions are there. I would refer that back to the architect or their engineer to determine how wide that is, but generally that's what they would be doing, is they would be turning around in that area.
How wide would that have to be? Without looking at it, I mean, is there some kind of, I mean, my car turns around in about a, I don't know, 30-foot street maybe?
Yeah, there are templates for turning movements
Yeah.
that they can demonstrate in there to see that, to show that that works.
Yeah.
And I have not seen those turning movements.
Okay. I can't read that. Do you know what that dimension is of the width of that court there?
42 feet.
What is it?
42 feet. 80.
42?
Oh, that's, sorry, from.
Here.
I know, but they don't hear.
No, in the motor court itself.
Yeah, they don't have a dimension, but it's smaller than 42.
No, right here. That's the 31?
Other questions for staff? I hope you guys can work this out. I'd like to take public comments. All right. Seeing no additional questions for staff, let's have public comments. Please come to the podium and give your name and address. You will have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Aftab Dada, and I managed the Hilton for the past 31 years in Palm Springs. I'm also here representing the Palm Springs Hospitality Association as their president, 192 members strong, as well as the chairman of PS Resorts. I'm here in full support of this absolutely magnificent project. And for some of you that don't know about it, Parker is the gem of our desert. Parker is the highest grossing transient occupancy tax and sales tax per key in the entire Coachella Valley. Parker has put this destination on the map, and everybody, all hoteliers and the entire tourism industry has reaped benefits like no tomorrow. This project, in my opinion, is not going to cannibalize any of the other boutique products that we have in the market. This is a gem that is going to far exceed any of our expectations, and this project is going to increase, in my opinion, 32 keys with the project cost in excess of $32 million, $1 million a key, and the land factor is not factored in. So this project is going to put us in a map that we've never seen before. The clientele that Parker is going to attract, it will be second to none. And I would like to, on behalf of the entire tourism community, congratulate Brandon and his ownership group to put this plan in play. And you all know it, that this project is self-funded by the Parker family. So we won't have the headaches currently that we are facing with the Ondas and the Dream and the project across from the Infusion Beach. So no eyesores. This will be a project that will be second to none and one of the finest projects, in my opinion, in the country. And we are blessed and fortunate to have it in our city and our destination. So I hope you will unanimously approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Instead of waiting, why don't you line up against the wall there? That way we can move this along. So please, come forward. Your name, please, and your address.
Hi, I'm Rick Miller, 2234 South Linden Way. I want to thank the commissioners for listening to us at the last Planning Commission meeting, and I can tell you've heard what the people said, and I thank you for your comprehensive questions about the aspects that we were concerned about. And I'd also like to thank Parker Management, including Mr. Mckerlie and the architects, for really responding to what our concerns were. We had some great meetings, and we think that they made some good choices. I think many of the impacts that we're concerned about at this point are more in the city's court as far as traffic and off-site parking. And if you do make some recommendations to council, I think we would all like to see some effort made for traffic to be working with Melody Ranch neighborhood to address some of these concerns we have. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Paul Sandman, 2466 South Linden Way. Two questions, or actually ideas I was throwing around that I wanted to talk about. One was the height of Parker Hall. It's a beautiful design, but it's been made mention a couple of times that there's an additional 4 to 5 feet that is basically masking any of the electrical or the HVAC systems that are necessary for the hall to operate. And I was wondering, in this day and age, with the building materials that are available, could that not be moved off the top of the hall and still create a quiet environment for the residents inside the Parker while they're staying there, thereby reducing the imposition of any sight lines from the homes across the street? Also, as far as parking goes, and I know this is not part of the initial Parker situation, but on Linden Way, again, they talk about valet parking, but there are many people that don't valet park. So I was wondering if a compromise could be made where the west side of the street remains available to Parker for additional parking and people who come to visit that are not valet parking. But would it be possible to do what's been done in San Francisco and West Hollywood and make the east side of the street resident permit parking, thereby possibly generating revenue for the city when somebody parks there illegally, or when residents need additional parking and they come for temporary permits from the city to have guests stay at their home? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Malia Daly, 2234 South Linden. And I also applaud that the changes made are much better. I am still a little concerned, though, with the entrance, the new entrance to Parker Hall, that it could possibly be moved to at least 100 feet out. I know that it's maybe not required, but maybe just to make it a little bit safer for people that are traveling on Linden Way, either making a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn on Seven Lakes, to have a visible, clear view to turn. I'm also concerned that if two large Sprinter vans that are maybe delivering people to Parker Hall, that they stack up one behind the other and then stick out onto Seven Lakes Drive, thereby again obstructing anybody turning on Linden left or right. The stacking up could be dangerous because of the view or lack of view. So perhaps setting it back 100 feet from the edge would be better. I know Rick said that it wouldn't make any difference, but I think it would if you were driving on Linden Way to make that a little more visual corridor. And also maybe if the Parker can accommodate a sign within the entrance and exit that asks the persons leaving to turn left, so that they can then make a safe left on Cherokee and go up to the intersection where there is a light, an intersection light, so that they can access 111. Otherwise, they're going to be driving down Seven Lakes to the corner of Gene Autry and Seven Lakes, and quite possibly there might be an accident there, because to make a left hand onto Gene Autry or even a right hand is immensely dangerous because of the speed of the vehicles driving on Gene Autry. Again, we have to have safety for our visitors and also our residents in Canyon Sands. So I would like to see a 100-foot setback and a left-hand turn sign out of the entrance. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Hall. I reside at 2495 Miramonte Circle West, Unit C, which is within the 500 scope of the project. I want to say that I don't oppose a well-done project, and it sounds like they're working towards that. I am a little concerned sitting here and seeing that you are making a decision with a lot of questions that have not been filled out. And I'm concerned that before you approve it, that you have a real clear picture of what you're approving. Because right now, I don't feel like you have a real clear picture of what you're going to approve. Secondly, once you approve it, from my experience when I was employed, I dealt with a lot of developers, and they would present plans and they would be approved, but when it got built, it didn't look like the plans. And so I would encourage you to encourage all the city agencies that will be involved in monitoring the development as it's built to make sure it complies with the plans that you approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Harvey Lewis, 2352 Miramonte Circle, West, Unit B. I want to add on to just what the gentleman was just saying about there's still a lot of some questions that there aren't answers to. And I feel strongly that we need to have those answers very clear, and there's a waffling going on. And the same thing, when things start, you can't undo them. And to me, there's still a trust factor involved. Last time we were told that they could build a meth lab on there if they wanted to. And there was this little family business that we're just getting in the way of. And so that's not a great attitude that sticks out to me. And the parking thing is still a problem to me in that, yes, the valet parking, they've got it routed differently, but Linden Way is still going to be an issue with people that aren't using valet. And I know I say everybody is, but they're not. I see them all the time, people parking, and I don't think you can regulate that. People in their own car, you tell them they got to go away and come back in a valet, or go back and get valeted, or get Lyft or Uber or whatever. They're going to park on their own. Still early mornings, and how are you going to regulate the Mercedes vans that are there, and they start backing up at early morning when people are still asleep, and that the beeping when cars back up, that it's a beeping that goes that is disruptive to sleep. The other day, again, I try to go watch it now more, and again, a diesel truck on a Wednesday, last Wednesday, Big Diesel was there and on Linden, and asked him, what are you here for? And they said, oh, it's for a wedding. I said, on Wednesday, a wedding? Yes. And they just sat there and they were blocking a driveway. And I said, well, you're blocking a driveway. And the guy shrugged. So how's that going to all be regulated? How's that going to be watched? Who's going to police that? Who's going to stop that? And, you know, I want to point out that from an emotional aspect, there's no benefit to us I'm in Canyon Sands. There's no benefit to us for this. We pay 299 homeowners paying taxes, and I just want to make sure that everything is on the up and up. Everything is going to be stood by. And as things are done, how's it going to be watched and policed and regulated that it's getting done correctly? Because, once it's done, it's not going to get undone. So that's, just make sure that's what I'll have. Yeah, we're just a very peaceful community. We bought our homes with that in mind, and now something's being put upon us that is kind of tough to deal with. So I hope that the parking will still be looked at longer and more restrictions somehow dealt with if this is going to indeed go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please. The microphone went off.
Press something?
His microphone went off. There we go.
Done? Okay. Dave Taylor, 2355 South Genoa Trail, Unit E. Parking is expensive. Cars take up a lot of room. The parker would like to use every square inch in order to maximize their profits. My question is, or request is, they've talked about using valet to take some of the cars away. There isn't any additional parking as far as street parking goes around the area. And maybe it would be prudent to ask them, where are they going to take these cars when they can't fit them in there and they have to go someplace else? That was it.
Thank you very much.
My name is Peter Nielsen. My husband and I own 2440 South Linden Way, Unit F. And I just do want to, state that the Parker Hotel has been a good neighbor as it relates to noise management and keeping the street tidy. What our concerns have been are about changing the character of our residential street into a commercial street. So we do really advocate and support moving the commercial entrance to Seven Lakes if it can't be on Cherokee Way. Our concern is quality of life and property value. And so maintaining that we don't have commercial traffic on our residential street is a big concern for quality of life. As far as property value goes, maintaining the residential feel of our street is important. And while Palm Springs has been, really growing and developing beautifully, thank you to the city of Palm Springs for all of its codes that really help enhance the sort of public enjoyment of all of the surrounding area. I'd like to, maybe, appeal to the Parker Hotel to, add some additional landscaping to the Linden Way Street to give it more of a residential feel. Because, when they were a new hotel, you are, concerned with cost and, creating this sort of small, intimate environment, as part of the original idea. But now we're, quite into this, and it's grown and is a much more mature organization. And I'd like to think that maybe that this particular street could have more sensitivity to being a residential street. Our community, Canyon Sands, really does invest in keeping our property well maintained, and they do benefit from it. So, while everybody in Palm Springs benefits from successful business, also a well-run HOA is a benefit to the community, and I think we really represent that. So, I think the Parker has a really great plan on the table, and whatever we can do to, be neighbors and support one another, I think is definitely in everybody's best interest. And I do want to appreciate the city and the Parker Hotel for all their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Donohue. I'm a Canyon Sands resident at 4493 East Seven Lakes Drive. I'm also a member of our HOA Safety and Preparedness committee, I'd like to express the views on the revised plan of many of our residents in our community as follows. First of all, we are grateful and pleased, thank you for all of your efforts, Brandon and staff, that many of our concerns have been addressed with the revised plan. And we do support the proposed expansion plan. We urge the Planning Commission, however, to recommend that the city implements a comprehensive traffic calming plan to address existing issues that we've already been speaking about, to traffic volume, speed, and street parking that can reasonably expected to be magnified by the project, perhaps not significantly, whatever that definition is, but this plan should include the following elements: a solution to the safety issues of high traffic, speed, such as the plan already submitted to the city engineering staff for flashing speed monitoring signs on East Seven Lakes Drive, a solution to the safety issues of traffic turning in either direction from the new entrance exit of the hotel, as well as on Linden Way onto East Seven Lakes Drive, such as the installation of stop signs at the intersection of East Seven Lakes Drive and Linden Way. A solution to the safety issue caused by the congestion at the intersection of East Seven Lakes Drive, Cherokee Way, and the entrance and exit to the Seven Lakes Country Club, such as the installation of a stop sign at the exit at Seven Lakes Country Club. A solution to the safety issues caused by the high volume of street parking, primarily on East Seven Lakes Drive and Cherokee Way, such as 1, requiring additional parking spaces for employees and guests on site at the Parker. Exhibit B of the plan shows an additional 39 spaces could be added for the entire property. And number 2, installation of angled parking along Cherokee Way, which would approximately double the amount of current parallel parking spaces used by Parker staff, as well as the Oasis Resort and Seven Lakes Country Club, and occasionally Canyon Sands residents as well. Our goal is to to request of you that you give your support to our efforts to work with the city to get these issues taken care of. Thank you for your consideration. I'd appreciate any guidance from the Planning Commission on how best to accomplish this goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Betty Flad. I live at 16 Desert Lakes Drive in Seven Lakes community. I also am a member of the board of directors for the Oasis Resort. So I have connections with both of those two organizations. I would tell you that Seven Lakes and the Oasis are very, very enthusiastic in their support of this project. We see this as an enhancement to the community. I must say that the Parker staff and Brandon have done a fabulous job of trying to work with all of us, Canyon Sands, Seven Lakes, and Oasis, to try and resolve some of the concerns that were first issued or emerged in the January meeting. The traffic issue that has been described, while yes, it does provide some traffic, I don't see that it's really the crux of what we're talking about today. This idea of taking out from the new driveway and a left-hand turn only, I personally really wouldn't support that. I don't think that is going to resolve anything at all. Gene Autry and Seven Lakes Drive have been dangerous intersections, and they will continue to be that way. But flowing all of that traffic to the left is going to, I think, create quite a bottleneck at the intersection of Seven Lakes Drive and Cherokee. So I personally don't support that at all. In talking with my community where I live, Seven Lakes, I really have not spoken with anyone who is not really excited to see this project go through. And I must tell you, and I'm sure you've heard this before, we've had everything from a rocket to drone shows to Ferris wheels. We've had a lot of amusement activities that have taken place over the years that have been really pretty disruptive to the Seven Lakes community. This project, I think, will narrow that down and will keep it more livable for the people at Seven Lakes and will be really a neighborhood enhancement for all of us. So I highly endorse it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ed Steinwender. We live on 2466 South Linden Way. In a nutshell, our concern is Parker's accountability. What assurances do we have that the information provided in the plans, business practices stated, etc., will be implemented once the project is up and running and the committee has approved it, all of which boils down to traffic, safety, and parking concerns. Like with 31 suites, I still do not understand how they can calculate the parking needs of 31 suites. What is the demographics of their anticipated guests? If like most resorts in the valley, they're coming from the Southern California market, they'll be driving in. So I don't understand why they think many of them will be flying in. If the Parker statements regarding the dining room and bar in the main house is not going to be a restaurant, does that mean that they cannot later, once they realize that the restaurant is not profitable, they cannot use it as a public restaurant, thus changing it and opening it to the public once the restaurant is open? In the event space, they say that they can hold 100 people, plus the main house can hold 90 people. Parker stated that in order for the event space to be rented, they must do so with a complete buyout. Well, if I were planning on holding an event at the Parker, I would be looking at a potentially 190 people because I would use the event space plus the main house. That's 190 people. And so that means 190 people parking space is going to be needed. With the employees, they're claiming that they will have 51 employees added in 3 shifts. So that would be roughly around 15 employees per shift. I don't understand how you can do 15 employees per shift for a luxury hotel with housekeeping, servers, kitchen staff, stewarding, restaurant, bars, reception, concierge, operators, bell desk, valet, landscaping for 15 employees. And they're supposed to be coming in and starting their shift and leaving their shifts at the same time. So the parking, again, just doesn't add up. I feel also that someone mentioned about the proposed plans for safety and parking. I think that this plan should not be approved until we have absolute assurance that the Parker will support those plans that we submitted to the city. Because once this plan is approved, we don't know how they feel about the proposals that we've submitted, like the no left turn onto or the left turn onto the exit from their resort.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Next.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Peter Sipkins. I live at 161 Desert Lakes Drive, but and that's within Seven Lakes. I am not here, however, as a representative of Seven Lakes, but rather as the chair of the Board of Advisors of Melody Ranch, the neighborhood organization in which all of these properties are located. I was here in January, and I want to acknowledge the passion and heartfelt concerns that were expressed at that time by the Canyon Sands residents who spoke about the project. But I'm really here today to acknowledge and to thank the Parker, the applicant, and the staff of the Parker for meeting with all of us within the neighborhood on 4 or 5 occasions, and I think adequately addressing the concerns that were expressed at that January meeting and coming up with a plan that is both feasible for the Parker in terms of a commercial venture and addressing at the same time the concerns that were expressed by the neighbors at the various meetings. I do want to say that the concerns that we heard and that were addressed were the ones concerning the entrance, the marshaling of vehicles on Linden Way, parking, and I think that all of those have been addressed in the plan that has been submitted. With respect to traffic, which was an issue that has been raised at a number of the meetings, I do want to say that I'm not sure that the traffic issue really has very much to do with the approval of the Parker. I have met with the Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee of 1PS, And at the same time, there were various representatives of Canyon Sands there. I understand that Seven Lakes has agreed to a mock-up facsimile of the kind of speed limit sign that was expressed today as something which Canyon Sands residents would like to see on Seven Lakes Drive. But I can't assure you until we have tested out to see how those things implicate and look from Seven Lakes, how much of the wall will be implicated, how much of the hedge will have to be cut down or whatever, whether or not that is something that Seven Lakes can support. But I do want to say that at this time, the neighborhood is working with all the various components of Melody Ranch to try to cooperatively work with Canyon Sands in order to limit the speed and to limit the and put stop signs up on Seven Lakes Drive. The city has not been, city engineering department has not been fully cooperative. They want to do a traffic study and they say, don't worry, the traffic study will show that there is insufficient number of cars in order to put up stop signs, so we won't do it. There is some concern about putting in speed pillows. There is concern about putting in the kinds of signs that have been addressed today. So I think that the traffic issue is an issue that needs to be addressed with the city engineers department and that this may not be the appropriate place to do it. Bottom line, the neighborhood strongly supports the Parker plan as it's been.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm John Kirchdorfer, 4455 East Seven Lakes Drive. I am currently the president of Canyon Sands HOA. I am here speaking for a majority of neighbors instead of having the bombardment of thousands of people coming in like we did last week or a month ago. I do have to say we have come a long, long way since we first met in January, and I have to give most of that credit to Brandon Mckerlie. He has been exceptional, and I think the designs and the things that they have done are a great compromise that everyone can live with. And like everyone is talking about today, there are traffic concerns on Seven Lakes. There was a study done in 2018 when we first started looking at traffic calming on Seven Lakes. At that point, we were asking for stop signs. When they did the study, and I believe they're using that study for the current project that's in the works with the city of the speed limit signs, at that time there was 1,127 cars on Seven Lakes Drive in a 24-hour period. Adding the estimated 280 cars, we're probably looking at 1,400 cars a day. I understand that the stop sign issue, according to engineering, is not feasible because there's not enough traffic on Linden Way. I think they have like 260 cars per day currently. So I think we're kind of looking at a position of trying to get something with the city to accommodate. There is going to be, there might be a need for a stop sign there because if people are pulling out of those driveways with the hedges 5 feet off, cars parked on both sides, I'd like to see traffic slow down for those people pulling out. And also for people pulling out and people coming down Seven Lakes Drive is going to be an issue that I think that we all have to look at. Like I said, these traffic issues are not part of the project, but they're going to be magnified with the project. But I do have to say that they have made great strides and improvements on it. And one of the questions a while ago, they were asking about the circle in front of Parker Hall. I believe if you look at it, it's actually 31 feet 2 inches from looking through the thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we will close the public comment section. The applicant has 2 minutes for rebuttal, if you'd like to do that.
I don't know that it's a rebuttal. I want to thank everyone for your comments. I did want to give a little clarifications. There are a few questions. One, the gentleman is essentially correct. The turnaround that you were asking about, Commissioner, is about 31, 32 feet. There was a comment about the height of the parapets being above 30 feet. Sorry for the confusion. The parapets are within the 30 feet. So the reason the building is 30 feet is because we can get those parapets that make it so that you don't see or hear mechanical equipment. There was a concern about where valet will be parking. They'll be parking on the on-site lots, and that's what the parking plan is showing, is how they can get additional cars using tandem, using compact parking methods. And it's worth pointing out that because Parker Hall is a high-end luxury resort, there will be no charge to guests for valet service, which also is a means of making sure that people are not parking on street. The comment about the driveway location, we cannot accommodate a driveway move further west within our plans. And then regarding the technical details, we absolutely will work through the permitting process with the Department of Public Works on the access way, and then also with the fire department to make sure we're meeting all technical requirements, but also providing a safe and comfortable access to the property. Did you have anything else?
No, I think that's great.
Thank you again.
Well, thank you. You might want to stay up there because we'll see if there are questions of the applicant from the commission. Commissioner Song. Well, I saw your hand go up first.
Sorry, guys. Okay, so thank you for all your work. I can't say how proud I am of being in Palm Springs. God, you guys do your homework. So I'm on both sides. So I'm just so jazzed of this involvement. So having said that, a couple of questions. On that sort of rotary that you have in front of the main house, you have this tiny little island for landscape. What is that for?
I think it's either just decorative paving or landscape or like a grass strip. It's basically just to direct.
A pot?
Yeah, no, it's basically just to direct cars so they know which way to force traffic in a certain direction, so it knows that they could turn around and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's trying to force the cars basically to be closer to the house when they do pull in case the valet has to turn around.
Okay. You should look that again.
Okay.
Okay. Then the curiosity, you have the kitchen on the north side, and then you have the kitchen garden on the south side. Mm-hmm. Why the relationship of not having that next to each other?
The kitchen garden is
They're two separate facilities. I mean, the kitchen is sort of a back of house where they're producing the food that guests are eating. The kitchen garden is, I would say, it's more of like a demonstration kitchen. It's kind of like an amenity for people who are staying there, that they might have a chef's kitchen thing, and it's really much more of like a, I wouldn't say there's not really cooking happening in there.
Okay. So let me tell you where I'm at. When I look at this project, I truly believe that your main house should be facing Cherokee Way because of the traffic light and because of the easiness of getting to the building. But I know why you put it on the other side, because then you keep all the activity on the west side of the site. So everything comes from Cherokee down to Seven Lakes, and then you're not interfering with Linden Way. The other thing that I like about what you've done is the fact that there is no headlights, even though you have this 20-foot hedges, there's no headlight into the canyon project because you don't have any parking. So in some ways, the reason why I would have preferred the main building on Cherokee is because if you look at the Oasis Resort, they have a much larger setback to where the buildings are. So there's much more room that you can play around, and as far as juxtaposition to a neighboring site. But I understand how limited you are in the conflict, and I think I much rather prefer what you have, which is not to have the parking next to the Canyon State projects. So having said that, let's talk about public sidewalks. You have about 10 feet. What do you have in mind in designing within those 10 feet? Obviously, you have a hedge that's 20 feet high. Mm-hmm. But in response to how you could reward the community on how you can design this parkway area, what did you have in mind? Because it can't be 10-foot sidewalk, right?
The sidewalk, I think, is 5 feet, a 5-foot actual paved sidewalk.
Okay, then what do you have between the back of sidewalk to the face of the hedge?
The face of the, we'd have to follow up with the landscape architect, but I know that
It'll be landscaped, right?
Correct, yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay, so no leftover, you'll pay attention to what you're going to design.
Oh, yes,
so
definitely.
So all three sites are addressed just as well. Okay, and then you're also going to look at where the hedges are going to be in relationship to the driveway. So people are not pulling out onto the sidewalk to figure out if they can turn left or right, right?
Yeah, and we want to work with engineering and the fire department regarding cutbacks and such to maintain visibility for vehicles pulling out.
Okay. So my last question, which I think it's more for the developers, it's, and I don't know if we have purview to this, but when there were several mentions about Linden Street being closed, we don't have a say on how they close the street and how they use the street, or how could they even ask for the street to be closed?
I can answer that if you'd like. If they're going to, if the hotel, the Parker, is going to apply for a special event permit that goes through our special event office here at the city, there is somebody who manages that. And they give them a site plan, they give them direction as to what they're going to do. And if there's any potential partial closures or anything like that, they would have to submit traffic control plans and that sort of thing. And then that would get routed to engineering, and somebody in our office would look at to see if it's actually feasible to do. I don't recall that we've ever been asked to look at a plan to close down the entire street. So, you know, in result of that, I would say that we would probably need to go back to special events and ask them to make sure that we're seeing those if that request does come in. But it's not something that we would normally do.
Okay, and the second part of that question is to this idea that Parker could park on the west side of the, for example, on Linden, that is limited to Parker on the west side and the east side is limited to the residents. Do you have any opinion on that, if that's a viable solution?
I don't think that the hotel has any objection to a preferential parking district if the city implements them, but I don't know if the city has any preferential parking districts currently.
I know, but I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty to park on Canyon Street to go to Parker to enjoy their wonderful facility. So, yeah, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Donohue.
My experience in being on the Planning Commission is typically matters of transportation, traffic safety are not within our jurisdiction and purview. And I know permit parking is a big issue now, and the council is looking at it for a number of neighborhoods. It makes a lot of sense, and in this case, it might make a lot of sense. I would encourage staff, if we get through this and we approve this project, that we urge the city council, when it's looking at this, to get transportation and engineering involved so that all of the issues regarding the traffic that we've heard today are taken into consideration, because I can understand how it's not a through street. You just got sort of it's three streets that form a sort of a courtyard, which is the Parker. And I can see where there could be some problems. They're not large streets, and there should be some real deep consideration giving to how it is safer and the traffic's handled better. But again, I think that's not within our purview typically. But we can certainly make it a condition that the city look into these matters and take Melody Ranch Neighborhood Association seriously when it's going to engineering to talk about some of these projects, because that's what the neighborhood organization is for, is to take care of its residents and reflect their concerns about traffic safety. Thank you.
Commissioner Lewin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Gentlemen, I think you've done a great job, and the people that have come out today to speak have testified that you worked very, very well with the community to try and address so many of their concerns. And I've seen a lot of projects, and it's rare that the community comes out and thanks the developer just 30 days later. It's usually a much longer process. It shows, I think, very good faith and good intent on your part. I wanted to echo what Commissioner Donenfeld said, that I think our job is to judge this project on the merits and recommend to the city to pay attention to traffic flow and urban street issues. And in all honesty to the community, The best time to really look at it is after this project, if it's approved, is built, because the traffic flow patterns will present themselves in real life at that point. Today, we could try and make a solution, but we won't really know if there's a problem or the nature of the problem until later, once the project is living and breathing. So I do urge us to recommend to council to pay attention to this, especially after the fact. I wanted to ask a very specific question because I think it's on the minds of some of the residents here. I believe you're agreeing to implement a special parking plan on site and maybe people need to hear again, by doing this, you're going to agree to it, and it's going to add considerable amount of parked vehicles on site. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. There's the Parker commissioned a third-party consultant to create what's called a specific parking plan that works within the city guidelines, plus looks at the land that the Parker has in order to find additional places to put, and as Noriko pointed out, up to 135 additional cars on top of the cars, the parking spaces that we're providing.
And see, I think that's just such a really significant thing, is that the Parker, somebody asked if, how do we know that they're really going to do it? But actually, that becomes a condition of approval that the new parking plan is implemented. And it does happen. There are many other projects that have been built where the developer has had to find additional parking and get creative. And what happens is they get more efficient. And so while you may have lived with something in the past, you might find that it actually gets better when we add 170 some odd parking places. So that is the extent of my immediate comments. I'd like to defer back to the chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Irvin, did you have something? I didn't know if you raised your hand. Commissioner Hirschbein.
I guess we're making comments, so I will thank the community again. Your initial comments obviously were heard, and modifications were made to the plan based on those comments. So thank you for making this process work so much better. And hats off to the development team for recognizing the need to do that and then responding. It gives me faith, and what we're doing here actually makes a difference. Also, I would like to thank the public speakers that came up this time, because you came up with a number of really good points that I didn't think through, and maybe some of my other commissioners didn't either, that I think we can include as part of our conditions of approval if we so choose. But thank you for bringing those points to us. I just have one question, and it kind of ties into the whole access to the site if you're parking on the street. Where are the pedestrian-only entrances? If I park on Linden, do I have to walk back to that driveway to get back into the site, or can I just walk straight through to the Parker Hall building? Can you show the plan so we can so the community understands that as well?
But in terms of guests can't park and then walk through.
Yeah, we obviously the hotel does not want guests parking on Linden. So that's.
But you didn't ask Marie, and she parks on Linden. So.
You could valet for free if you park in the site. So.
No, but could you get the plan up and then maybe point to where the pedestrian entrances are?
Is the question about guest access?
No, I'm talking about pedestrian.
So there will be a pedestrian gate on Linden.
Wait, just get to the. Okay, there you go.
So if you look at the arrow that says right next to where it says the main house,
yes,
there's a pedestrian gate adjacent to that right there too, and then there will be a pedestrian gate where it says ADA parking. Mm-hmm. That will be for staff in case they need to get a housekeeping cart or something in there as well.
So theoretically, I could park on Linden and walk into the property.
Those are locked, though.
But those will be locked.
They're going to be locked.
Yes. Well, they'll have card key access to them.
So these are for
They
site
don't want
egress
you
and
there.
Perfect.
Michael.
Okay, that's the right answer.
Any other questions of the applicant before we finish our discussion? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? We need some. Ultimately, we need a motion.
Yeah, I'll
Commissioner
put some-
Hirschbein.
I'm going to put some, I said my comment about the process, and again, thank you to both sides on this. But I do have some conditions I'd like to put on an approval as it moves through this now.
We're not making a motion at this point, but yes, you can raise those now if you'd like.
Okay, so I would like to make a condition that those pedestrian gates remain locked, short, with use of card key only entrance, as they just mentioned. I'd like to make a condition that the restaurant be used only for guests of the Parker, or in the event of a buyout for outside guests as well, but not as a regular restaurant. So whatever licensing that takes the form of. I think we should look at, and I'm not going to make a proposal at this point, but the time of events, the outdoor events, the time should be limited. And I'm open to hearing from the other commissioners what time that should be. I noticed something in the staff report about no amplified sound outside, but I'd like to make that a condition of approval as well. Resident parking for site. Okay, and then the last one is just basically what's already been said about we should make a recommendation to council as part of, if we do approve it, as part of the approval, that they instruct staff to determine what the community would like in the way of parking and traffic controls around those 3 streets. I did have a question of staff. Is this a preliminary approval and it comes back to us?
This will be a preliminary and final.
Oh, and final?
Yeah.
Okay, because typically we get something at this level of resolution and then it comes back to us for a second. Is there a reason why it's not coming back?
Because you have a limited project that's only 32 rooms and they have the architectural design more or less finalized on this, that it would be coming as a preliminary and final instead of coming back in phase 2.
Okay. Okay, so those are the things I think should be included.
I think Flynn took great notes.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I might suggest, one of the conditions that Mr. Hirschbein had recommended is relative to traffic calming measures in the neighborhood. What I might recommend to you all is that we amend engineering condition number 51, which speaks to traffic calming measures, to include consideration of such things that were suggested, such as speed monitoring signs, installation of stop signs where warranted, and to study parking issues, including angled parking on Cherokee. And so what we would recommend is we would amend that condition to include those suggestions.
I wrote down a list if you want me to go. I have some more things.
Okay.
Okay, so one is studying a resident parking permit district. I kind of like the idea about the left turn only out of the hotel. I do think that intersection at Gene Autry and Seven Lakes is extremely dangerous, and I think it makes more sense to make a big U-turn, or, you know, and then get back onto Gene Autry from 111. Time of events. Stop sign at Seven Lakes and Linden, you mentioned. They could study angled parking. I'm not sure if that's a big plus or not. And that's it, yeah.
Okay.
Other discussion? Commissioner Song?
I'll just list them out. I think there were concerns about the building. I think they show the fact of the hedges in relationship to the buildings and the fact that the mechanicals are completely screened with the parapet. I believe it meets one of the biggest issues. Nordico, as well as the applicant, they ensured us that the site plan is going to be reviewed and approved by fire department as well as engineering. So all the configuration, turning radius is going to be all worked out. And then we talk a number of issues about how to recommend to City Council that the traffic issues should definitely be looked at, even as a city. It goes in there. And then the fact that the developer is going to pay attention to how the public right-of-way is going to be designed so that it's both harmonious with the project and also a part of the urban design of the adjacent developments as well. As far as the parking goes, they are going to increase it by 150 or so spaces. I think a side note to that is if you can make an effort to park all your commercial projects where the residents are not viewed to them, I think that would be a great compromise as well.
Are you suggesting that as a part of a motion? Commercial, you're saying the commercial vehicles need to park on Cherokee?
Cherokee or on-site. But that could be, I will definitely want to bring that up. But in this discussion is to say there were issues, the applicant addressed it, they're going to address even more. And so, and including the noise issue, they have a ordinance for time of day and how many decibels as far as the conditions of approval. So all in all, I think comprehensively it's all in here with the conditions that have been mentioned 10 minutes ago.
Commissioner Donohue, did you have something?
I'll make a motion. No, I thought Maria was going to make a motion.
Well, I was just curious, are there any thoughts regarding Commissioner Hirschbein's list?
Well, I thought I would agree, if I would make, my motion would be to approve the project, approve the staff report with the conditions as enumerated by Commissioner Hirschbein and I think Commissioner Song.
I don't think you need to read them back because it would take quite a long time.
I'll just say that one of the conditions suggested by Mr. Hirschbein was a limitation on the time of events. I don't believe there was a concurrence from the members of the Planning Commission on that.
Mr. Chair, I would absolutely ask that we get an enumeration of any additional amendments to the staff report, because I'm not sure that. Yeah,
all right.
I want it for the record.
Before we do that, though, I'd like to find out from the applicant what your thoughts are regarding...
First of all, do I have a second? I think I need a second.
Oh, I thought we had a second.
So for discussion purposes.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Song? Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to find out from the applicant your thoughts regarding what we're suggesting here.
So about the pedestrian entrances remaining locked, I think there's no issue with that. The restaurant for guests only, there's no restaurant, but it's not for, there's no public food service facility. Don't have an issue with that. The time of outdoor events limited, I think that we already are constrained by city rules and regarding that. You probably could speak to that better than me. So if there's additional time, I mean, we just would ask that they adhere to city rules. No amplified outdoor sound. There's no amplified outdoor sound, so no issue with that. Recommendation for, oh, that wasn't related, that wasn't a condition. And then studying the permit parking district. I don't think the hotel has any issue with that. I think that because we've heard from separate community groups about left turn only out, we'd be a little concerned with that being constraining where some other community members might not be happy with that. So we would suggest not putting that as a condition, and maybe we can work through it and make sure we come to a solution that has everybody happy. And I don't think there's any issue with a stop sign at Seven Lakes and Linden.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Flynn, do you want to read back?
Requirement on timing for outdoor or events there.
There isn't any specific language in the code in terms of when events end, but there are limitations under the noise ordinance that at 10 p.m. the decibel level decreases significantly.
Okay. Are you guys okay with that, or do you want to put a...
And we already referenced the city's noise ordinance in the conditions of approval.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very limited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Flynn?
So going back through the conditions that are proposed, number one is that the pedestrian gates on Linden shall remain locked and be available via card key access only. The food service at Parker Hall shall be limited only to guests of the facility. The third was relative to the time of events. We'll just reference the noise ordinance in terms of the decibel level. Number four is relative to no amplified sound outdoors on the Parker Hall property. Fifth is relative to traffic calming suggestions, including considering the studying of a parking permit district, studying a left turn only out of the driveway of the parker, studying angled parking, study the installation of speed monitoring signs on 7 lakes, and stop signs as may be warranted. And then Commissioner Song added the condition relative to the project shall conform to turning radii and aisle widths for the driveways and parking areas per engineering and fire. The landscape treatment on the perimeter of the property between the sidewalk and the hedge shall conform to the landscape plans as approved by the Architectural Advisory Committee. And then there was a final condition relative to commercial vehicles being restricted to parking on Cherokee or on the site itself. Does that capture the conditions as proposed by the Planning Commission?
Commissioner Lewin.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think you're outstanding, Flynn, in your ability to aggregate information. I'm just, as a commissioner, I don't think I fully understand that very last one, which was the idea of
Commercial parking?
Yeah, I just don't understand.
Yeah, and it seems to me that would be something that the applicant, do you understand the
And I'm not sure we can
condition?
We can or should condition a project on something if it's not feasible. I just don't know what's going on there, so.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Brandon Mckerlie, General Manager. The commercial vehicles, I think, were more of an issue in current situation, not as presented. We have no desire for commercial vehicles to be on any street. So I'm not sure, I wouldn't condone or encourage Cherokee either. We'd keep everything on property.
As I recall, the concern last time was when you have the International Film Festival after a closing party or after party.
Correct.
That becomes a real problem because you do get a number of commercial vehicles parking along Linden. But that's really not before us today. I mean, that's something that should be worked out, but it's not before us with respect to this permitting.
Right, that is the one day a year that there's a request for the street to be restricted to residents only, not actually closed. We've got 1,000 people coming into the hotel, so there's a lot of traffic, there's no question. It is that one day of the year.
Thank you. So is there this revision regarding the commercial vehicles, is that accepted by the motion maker and the second? It is?
Yes.
Okay. Then we shall vote. Passes unanimously. Congratulations, and thank you all for coming and speaking today. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
And your good work with working with the applicant. That was excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, just for the members of the public, this item will be going forward to the City Council. We don't have a date yet, but we do anticipate most likely the beginning of March. Public hearing notices will go out in advance of the City Council hearing. So thank you very much.
I'd like to take a 10-minute break. I'd like to take a 10-minute break. Much better. Are we waiting for Jim? Jim Priest? Oh, we are missing Mr. Donohue. Never mind. I know. All right, I'm calling the meeting back to order. Second public hearing, item 2B, City of Palm Springs for an amendment to the Palm Springs zoning code relative to an annual update of zoning regulations. Staff report, please.
Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Planning Commission, you have before you the annual update to the zoning code. This is the opportunity that staff has to make minor corrections to the zoning code, typically based on things that we discover over the course of the year that need to be corrected, are out of date, are no longer in compliance with state law, etc. As part of this, we're not proposing any major policy changes, however. I'll just give you a quick summary, and then if there's any specific questions, I'll open that up to you all. In terms of the topics that we addressed as part of this correction, language in the code relative to video and amusement arcades is way out of date, and so we're proposing to update that. Also clarifying regulations for wedding chapels. It's not clear in our code exactly where they're permitted or what the parking requirement is. We're updating daycare standards in accordance with state requirements. Also updating districts where accessory dwelling units are permitted to make sure that we're consistent there, as well as manufactured housing. We're clarifying residential uses in the open space zone to be consistent with the general plan. We had a discrepancy there that we discovered over the course of the year. Also, we're adding hotel parking standards where they're part of mixed-use projects. That wasn't identified before and has come up. We're adding language relative to electric vehicle charging stations being considered as part of the required parking count so that we can encourage those as part of parking lots. We also need to make some minor changes to our temporary sign regulations to be consistent with interpretation of federal law, particularly how that applies to election signage. So there's some minor changes there. I also needed to make some corrections to our restaurant menu signs to make sure they're consistent between the two different sign regulations for the downtown district and other commercial districts. We've also made some corrections to our trash enclosure requirements. And then City Council specifically requested that we bring forward to them language relative to distance waivers for cannabis uses. They want to maintain the existing criteria that we have, but wanted flexibility in City Council being able to adopt by resolution other criteria as may be discussed from time to time. So that summarizes the proposed changes that we have. And again, I'm happy to take any questions and address those that you might have.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Well, I have one. Just this issue of the temporary sign regulation. So this also includes the signs that candidates place in the ground?
Correct.
What has changed?
What has changed is we had language there previously about a time frame, a time limit relative to certain types of signs, which was intended to address election signs. Based on the interpretation of federal law, we can't have those time limits there any longer, and so we're taking that language out. And so that's the primary change that we're making there.
What would be an example of a time limit? Like within 5 days of the end of the election, they had to remove them?
Yeah, we had language to the effect that temporary signs for a special event could be in place 60 days prior to the event and then up to 5 days after the event. Essentially, what we need to do is to take that language out. And Mr. Priest, I don't know if there's anything else I need to add to that. Okay.
Okay. Like those signs can stay up for quite some time afterwards, and you don't know who's going to take them out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yes, Commissioner Song.
In addition to that, Flynn, I noticed that on the residential zones, due to the state requirements, you're making reference to the accessory dwelling units.
Correct.
So in those where now setbacks are being not challenged, but
reduced.
Reduced.
Yeah.
The state will govern in this case.
Correct. Actually, what we'll be doing is, I didn't feel it appropriate to bring it forward as part of this ordinance. We'll bring a separate ordinance relative to the recent changes in state law for accessory dwelling units. So you'll see that at one of your March meetings.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I
Commissioner
have a
Irvin?
question. What were the minor modifications for the cannabis that you?
On the very back page of your handout, so on page 9 of the legal size document there, what City Council had an issue with was the criteria that they used to consider whether or not to grant waivers. That some of the language that they had in there, they didn't feel was necessarily appropriate and should be applied each time. And so what they're requesting is that we have our standard criteria in looking at minor modifications, which includes impacts to adjacent businesses and things like that. In addition to that, they'd like language that states that City Council may add additional considerations in looking at waivers as they adopt by resolution. So it gives them the flexibility to add additional criteria in terms of whether or not to grant a waiver by resolution.
Would that have anything to do with the social equity program?
That could be one of the things that they considered. That was something that the Planning Commission originally considered. Council looked at that. Was not ultimately happy with the language that we as staff had proposed. But again, that's something that they could consider as part of this expanded language that they're giving themselves here.
Any other questions for staff? If there are any public comments from the audience, please come forward at this time. Give us your name and address. Apparently there are none. Is there a motion? Oh, you'll make the motion, Commissioner Song? In a second, please? Someone? Commissioner Lewin. I'm sorry, of course. Do you want to say what it is, Commissioner Song? As presented by staff. And we have a second by Commissioner Lewin. Please vote. Any more discussion? Please vote. It passes unanimously. Good job. All right, now we're going to move on to new business. Item 4A, Keith Springer for a major architectural application to remodel an existing commercial building for a cannabis dispensary. Staff report, please.
Vice Chair Marizzi and Planning Commissioners, the request before you is a proposed remodel and expansion of a commercial building that is located at 290 West San Rafael Place. And if I can get the screen presentation up, I'll continue further. So what you have here on the screen is, just to give you a bit of context, as I said, it's 290 West San Rafael Place. It is located to the north of San Rafael Road, which is probably the more common road people are familiar with. San Rafael Place is a private street just north of San Rafael Road and west of Indian Canyon Drive. The site specifically that you're looking at today is at the very westerly end of this private street, and it is surrounded in red on the right side of the screen in front of you. So the property currently is developed with an existing building that's roughly 1,000 square feet in size. There is an accessory building at the rear of the property, which is seen here at the top of the screen. And so that would be removed. And what they do propose is to, and actually before I go into that, just here's some photographs of what the existing building looks like. The front is what you see here on the left, and then the rear of the building is shown in the picture on the right. So what they intend to do is remodel that building by adding new walls around the structure, creating a new roof line, a flat roof, around the edge of the building, and expanding the structure and adding to the north of the site about 1,250 square feet in size. So when you look at the site plan here on the screen, the darker shaded area of the floor plan is the existing building footprint, and you'll see along the edge of the building at the top of the screen and the right side of the screen, they're keeping the existing walls and putting new walls around the building, and then of course adding new walls to the rear and the west side of the building for the expanded footprint of the project. So the overall building would be 2,278 square feet in size. They are adding a new parking area and landscape space at the rear and a new trash enclosure. So as I said, the existing building will remain. So you see that here on the roof plan, there is the existing gable roof that will be retained, and then they will have to accommodate the drainage by making some modifications to that roof. These are the elevations that were initially presented with the project when it was submitted. So this is the front of the building at the top of the screen, the south side, and then the east side proposed on the bottom of the screen. The total height of the structure is 14.5 feet above the finished floor. And this is the north elevation, or the back of the building on the top of the screen here, and the west elevation, or the which is not really visible from the front of the property. They are adding some landscaping for the project. They're adding 2 landscape fingers to provide some landscape adjacent to the front of the building, and the parking stalls that will accommodate some shade trees, as well as some landscape at the rear of the property. And the materials that are being proposed are consistent with the materials that we generally like to see or require as required by our municipal code in Chapter 8 of the Municipal Code for desert appropriate plant materials. And so the project was reviewed by the Architectural Advisory Committee back on January 21st. The AAC did recommend approval of the project unanimously, 7-0, or a unanimous recommendation, subject to conditions. So there were 7 conditions that the AAC had as a part of the recommendation, and I'll go through some of those visually here on the screen in just a moment, as the applicant has made some revisions to the elevations. And those would be, as you see here, detailed in the first 4 comments or recommendations. That would be to relocate the stone on the front, continue the cornice detail at the rear, choose an alternate material for the wood trellis structure at the front, and reevaluate the location of the downspout on the front of the building. And also, as I said, I'll go through those in just a second on the screen. They are also being requested AAC also requested that they lower the height and reduce quantity of the wall packs on the building, add landscape lighting, and ensure that the lighting for the project conform to the city's outdoor lighting standards. So what you see here on the screen is the front of the building, the front elevation of the building. On the top of the screen is what was originally submitted and reviewed by the AAC. On the bottom of the screen is what's been revised by the applicant since the AAC has reviewed it. So to point out the specific changes you see in the yellow here, they've relocated the stone element to the center of the front of the building, and they've relocated the downspout to the side of the building, so it is not as close as, there are some comments about the proximity to the wall sconce. In addition, the trellis structure is a different material than wood, so they've changed that. It's not easily seen here on this exhibit, so I'll just bring that to your attention as well. When you look at the material callouts on the specific page, which is the last page of your packet, it's a different material than wood. And at the rear of the elevation, you see they continue the cornice detail at the top of the building, and they've carried the wainscot to the interior corner of the building at the back. So they continue that per the AAC's recommendation. And just to kind of give you an overview of the process for this application, because it is a cannabis dispensary, the City Council is required to review this project. Any exterior changes that are proposed to a cannabis dispensary must go to the City Council per the city's special conditions for cannabis businesses in section 932315 of our zoning code. So what you're reviewing today is is the project that would be, or our recommendation today is that you recommend approval of the project to the city council subject to conditions as shown in the resolution attached to your report. So I'll conclude with that. The applicant is here if you have questions of them, and I'm available for questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newell. Commissioner Donohue, questions for staff.
I have one question. I understand what a cannabis dispensary is. Distribution typically is attached to cultivation manufacturing. What is being distributed out of this facility to other places? Is it going to be like warehousing finished cannabis products to be distributed to other dispensaries?
Does staff have an answer, or do we want to have the applicant respond?
The applicant would probably be better to respond to that question.
All right, then applicant, can you come forward? We'll turn the microphone on.
Hi, my name is Mike Pernod, and I live in San Diego, 3507 Caminito Sierra, in Carlsbad, California. And the distribution is really...
Could you speak closer into the mic, please?
Yeah, the distribution is really more designed for us to be vertically integrated, so we don't have to pay someone else to supply us with product. We're not going to cultivate anything, manufacture anything. Everything's prepackaged. It's just a matter of that you have to have that license in order to take product from, manufacturer to retail. So we need that to vertically integrate, but there's not going to be any type of manufacturing or cultivation.
Will it be like sort of a warehouse? You'll be warehousing your own product for future sales? Is that it? So you'll have a
Basically,
backstock?
yes, yep.
Thank you.
Commissioner Irvin.
So if they're warehousing the items, will the cannabis have any sort of a smell? And then also, is this in the moratorium area that we have permitted in Palm Springs? I guess that's two parts to a question.
I'll address the question about the moratorium. There was a moratorium in this area on new applications for cannabis uses. However, with the adoption of the recent amendment to our cannabis regulations, the moratorium is no longer in place. With the new regulations, however, no new cultivation facilities and no new Type 6 or Type 7 manufacturing facilities are permitted in this zone. So moving forward, we won't see any new cultivation or manufacturing facilities.
Okay.
In terms of the odors from the product itself, as the applicant has indicated, it's prepackaged items. They're not going to be packaging items there in the facility itself. So with prepackaged items, typically there is little or no odor related to that.
Commissioner Lewin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a little confused. This is a retail establishment selling cannabis at the end of a private road? Is that what it is?
Yes. Yeah, it's a retail establishment. The road that is there, it is required that they have access to the public, though.
So this, it just strikes me as odd. So at the end of this private road, there will be a retail facility, and next door to it, are those residential units, or what is it zoned for? And forgive me for not knowing this in advance.
It's an M1 zone, so they look kind of like a residential building, but they're actually zoned for manufacturing.
Okay, so we don't think that this is a dispensary in the middle of a neighborhood in the end. This is a light industrial manufacturing area.
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
I might add, I did walk it, and it's nowhere near residential. And in fact, this may not be mid-century aesthetic, but you've embellished your building far beyond anything else that's around there. You've really brought it. Yeah, I mean, that area needs a lot of work.
Commissioner Irvin.
Sorry, please go.
Yeah, I had another question too. I don't know if the master planning has thought about repaving the road. The road there that's currently there is quite awful. So I don't know if we've kind of took into consideration.
What is meant by a private road? Could staff explain that?
to. Okay, I'll explain that. Private road is exactly that. It is not a public right-of-way. The city has no vested interest in that property. It is strictly private, and it is encumbered by an easement. So all their property lines come straight across the property, and then it's encumbered by an easement that's for their private use. Within the easement, there are language in there that refers to utilities having the right to install utilities in there and the right for emergency vehicles and personnel to ingress and egress. Otherwise, the city has no jurisdiction over the maintenance of the road, nor will it take over any maintenance or do anything in it in the future because it does not meet minimum city standards for a public road.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes.
Good. Anyone else? Well, yes, the applicant can come up and you can ask a question. Commissioner Song?
So on the site plan, in the rear parking, you almost show us if there is a driveway connection on the west property line. Is that the case?
It is. It's currently there is a gate there, but there isn't. We're planning on using that gate, and John might be able to speak better to that. But yeah, there's room there now. We just have to remove the gate and then go back where that other building is, the old building that we're going to tear down, and that's where the parking is going to be. But there is an entrance there currently, and we're planning on using that to get behind the building to the north side.
Okay, so right there where that car is situated, on the west side, next to the dwelling that's in the back, are you saying that parking is connected?
I don't see any cars on our property there.
No, not on your property, but on the adjacent property.
That car there? Okay.
You're saying there's a driveway connection from your back parking to the adjacent property?
I'm saying from San Rafael Place, which would be at the bottom.
Right.
There's that right there. There's a gate there that we plan to open up to let people drive to the back, where we're going to put parking at that top where that building is. The other building, that white top building next to all the other cars, that's going to be where the parking would be, and they would drive up from San Rafael Place to the right side there to get back there.
Yeah, that's not, sorry, it's the back parking area. Maybe there's a site plan?
On the left-hand side of that photo.
I don't.
Yeah, right there. You see that gate on the right?
No,
right
yeah,
there?
that's not it.
So her question is related to the parking lot on the bottom left of this exhibit. Sorry. Down here you have, it looks like an access driveway. And if that's not an access driveway, what is the purpose of having it that way?
Yes, currently as designed, there is access there.
There's access to the adjacent,
I'm sorry?
there's access to your adjacent property.
Yes, there is the ability to cross over. At the moment, we do not have a wall on that western edge.
Okay. So you're not.
Will you? Is that part of the plan?
There's a gate there.
To having a wall to answer her question?
Because there's parking on the other side.
Yeah, well, it's a separate property. It's nothing we have any control over. It's not our,
There's a fence there currently.
Oh, there's a fence.
Right, so the question really is, part of your design is to connect to the adjacent property so they have access to their parking?
no, as Mike said, there is a fence there currently. We haven't proposed constructing a block wall or anything, but there is a measure of security that certainly prohibits communication between our property and any of the others.
Okay, so there is an existing metal fence that you plan to keep,
Yes,
and therefore there will be no access to
No
the
access.
adjacent property. Okay,
we want it secure.
okay, good. In your renderings, you show, does the planter pots that you show, is that for artistic purpose? You see those pots in your rendering?
Yeah, the potted plants and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, just for some additional, color and interest
Design.
planting. I mean, we have all the required planting in ground that is mandated by code in terms of both the coverage and landscape percentage. Pots and the like would just be extra ornament.
Okay, and that sidewalk is 6 feet 2 inches? 6 feet 2 inches wide. What's the size of those potted plants?
Well, that was kind of thrown in the rendering, but I mean, the idea for the pots, they show up a little bit better in the elevations.
Yeah, it's just that they're not on the side plan.
24 to 36 inch pots.
Okay. I love planting. They soften buildings. They're the right thing to do in such type properties. The issue is that if there's not proper irrigation and proper care, they just end up looking like empty trash cans. So.
Understood.
Yeah. So where I see the opportunity is where you have the recess area to actually make it into a destined planter area that you have instead of being in the middle of the sidewalks. Is that something that you would consider as part of your landscape design? Yeah.
Yeah, right now we have, well, again, we're showing like a sitting area or something that provides a little bit of, exterior seating, outside seating if was necessary, or for those who might find it necessary. In that recess of the building, that's an existing condition of the building. So we're showing some bench seating in there, but certainly as we move eastward, where we're showing, again, some pots and planting for that sort of interest, if it was desired that we pull the sidewalk back there a couple feet or so and introduce planting at that point, that's easily done.
Yeah, as far as the benches goes, I think it's nice for people, but you don't think people are going to be hanging out. They're going to go inside and they're going to purchase your thing and then they're going to leave. It's not a plaza area. I think you do your business and then you get out. Because otherwise you're going to have people just hanging out there that don't really have anything to do with your business.
If the thought is that, for lack of a better word, undesirables might be just hanging out, we wouldn't be putting seating in there to allow that to occur. It's an accommodation.
So I may ask, is that part of the program of your business to have people outside?
It's a space in a neighborhood that has nothing else around. If somebody needed to sit and wait perhaps for a friend or whoever was making a purchase, then it's available to them. I would say that if there's a concern at the city level, at your level, as far as providing seating, it can go away. We just considered it to be an amenity.
Okay. And as far as the trail is, I know that AAC done a really good job in pointing out, and then you worked on the changes. The trail is the trail structure in front of it.
Yes.
Is that to demark the entrance of the building, or is that to shade the parking space in front?
It's just over the sidewalk. It's not, and that's where the entry to the building is. And again, it provides a little bit of shade were somebody to be sitting there. The building itself is fairly plain and straightforward, so the trellis adds a little bit of detail to the front at the same time as leading you to the entry and providing some shade in that area.
Okay, all right.
Because, and I will say that just because of the nature of the use in the building, there are no windows. So, it makes working the elevations a touch more challenging. So the trellis is introduced to add a little more visual interest to the front elevation.
Yeah, I understand. I would have worked it with the building height elevations rather than, anyway. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for either staff or the applicant?
Again,
Commissioner Lewin. I'm sorry. It's Commissioner Lewin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask staff a couple of questions. Is the driveway width, does that conform to public safety access needs? And was public safety in any way consulted? I want to share my concerns so you can answer and understand what I'm asking. For me, what I see is a retail establishment being placed at the dead end of a private road. And I'm not debating the wisdom of the business owner as to whether that's the best location, because that's your risk and your determination. But I want to make sure that police, fire, and ambulance can access this site, and whether it needs to be from the front or the back. And it just seems like a very awkward lot. So could you speak to that?
Sure, certainly. So the project was routed to the fire department for their review and comment. I did specifically ask them about the driveway condition because it is, it is an existing condition, and they felt that it wasn't of concern. They have some conditions that they've specifically called out, having access to the rear. So for them, as long as they comply with these conditions that they've given us, they seem to be okay with the proposal as it is.
Okay, so public safety's looked at it and they're okay. They've made the recommendations. It's part of the conditions. And the planning department thinks that this is a fair use of the property as far as you guys are concerned.
Correct.
Okay, that's all of my questions.
Commissioner Dunfeld, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I'm
All
not
right.
going to say.
All right. Would someone care to make a motion at this point? Commissioner Hirschbein?
Make a motion to approve with conditions per staff.
Any second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Please vote. Approved unanimously. Congratulations.
Can I say something to the new commissioners?
Certainly. Commissioner.
I know you guys probably had some questions about the cannabis business thing, and prior to you coming on commission, we've had a lot of meetings about it, so there's a lot of history, and it took me a while, because I missed the study session, it took me a while to get up to speed, but you're in a good position in that the moratorium is off and this new zoning code is in place, so we actually have something to go by. Before, we were sort of shooting in the dark as far as what we should approve or shouldn't approve. What you got to be careful for, and this is what I learned, and you guys tell me if it's wrong, but there's this level 6 and level 7, which is growing and processing, which causes all the olfactory problems, the smell problems, and that's what we really drilled down on previous to this, but now that they've removed that to the far ends of the earth, hopefully, we won't have that problem in town anymore. But so what's allowed is stuff that doesn't really produce those kind of problems. That's the goal anyway.
Thank you. Now for other business.
Thank you.
Item 5A, discussion of Planning Commission meeting start time.
As the commissioners are aware, at your last meeting, you discussed the possibility of requesting City Council to allow your meetings to start at 6 p.m. What I would like to do is to get a consensus from the Planning Commission if your preference is to start at 5:30, which is what all the other boards and commissions are being directed to do, or if you'd like to start at 6 p.m. I will then forward your recommendation to the City Council, and they will decide whether or not to honor that request. So with that, Mr. Chair, is there a discussion or motion in terms of which you would prefer?
Question.
Yeah.
From my interpretation of what the City Council approved, they were pretty firm about 5:30. And the only exception I recall them saying they would make is if someone was going to resign from the board or commission because they can't, the 5:30 is too early.
Yeah.
But would that be an issue here? Is there anyone that would need to resign because of that?
Between 5:30 and 6? Doesn't make any
No, the question just being 5:30, period. If you can't make 5:30.
Well, I've contemplated it. I haven't made any decisions.
Okay. So if we recommend 6 p.m., do we have to give a good reason? Or can we just state that we think it's more appropriate?
It would be helpful to have a reason or a justification, so that way City Council will give adequate consideration to your request.
Well, since we're discussing this, I would suspect they would deny it. because probably of all the commissions and boards that the public comes to, this is one of them, probably the most important.
And I would think we'd want to start as early as possible because we will be the busiest and likely to stay the longest very often. So earlier we start, the earlier we get out of here.
I mean, I push for 6 p.m. because
You want to eat?
because I don't eat that early. But, that just is not what the council is concerned about, my eating habits. So therefore, yeah, Commissioner Song.
Yeah, we want to get out as early as possible, yeah. But what I thought was, the whole intent is for the public to be able to come to these meetings, right? So if they work until 5 o'clock, they're able to get out of their work and then be able to get here, but in 1 hour. So if we're really making an effort for the public to present themselves, then 6 o'clock will give everybody the time to get here at 6 o'clock.
I wish the council had considered
The council's made a determination that it's 5:30 unless we have a very special, exceptional reason for otherwise.
Well, if it is the fact that we're going to resign, obviously, we're not going to resign. So
I can't imagine resigning over a half an hour.
Commissioner Lewin?
Yeah, I just want to say, we clearly are appointed by the council. We serve at the time that they designate. And when the question was asked of us, what's your preference? I think we all gave our preference. But for myself, speaking strictly, I'll meet at whatever time that the council designates. And if it's better for the community to have a set start time across the board, then, I'll bow to the wisdom of that, without a doubt.
Do we have to actually have a motion?
Not necessarily. Yeah, it can be the Planning Commission.
So does anyone have any disagreement with the 5:30 start time or want to make an argument as to why we should not start at 5:30? All right, so there you go.
Okay, so by lack of action otherwise, the Planning Commission will start at 5:30 at your first meeting in March.
In March. Is that so we have one more in
You
February.
have one more at 1:30 on February the 26th.
All right, so that concludes today's agenda. Are there any reports from members of the commission? We don't have a city council liaison report or anything, do we?
No, we do not.
Does the planning director have anything to
I
report?
do have a number of items. First of all, I sent to you earlier this week a copy of the announcement and flyer for our first general plan community workshop, which is scheduled for February the 24th at 5:30 p.m. That will be held in Primrose B at the Convention Center. I would encourage all of the planning commissioners to attend. It is going to be in an open house format where we will have tables and staff members available to meet face-to-face with members of the public and take their input. The tables will be directed to the different elements of the plan that we're updating. So there will be one discussing land use, another one discussing housing, a third discussing circulation, and then we'll have a fourth table discussing the overall vision for our community. We'll have a brief presentation at 6 p.m. by our consultant talking about the general plan update process. We'll also have surveys available for members of the public to fill out and to give us their opinions. So again, February the 24th, 5:30 p.m. at the Convention Center. We'd like to see all of you there. Please feel free to distribute the electronic flyer that we sent to anyone who might be interested. We have done a news release that was just sent out today. We're also sending the flyer to various community groups and making presentations to 1PS and other groups, inviting them to attend that. We will also have the flyer in Spanish, and we'll have an interpreter there for anyone who speaks Spanish and needs assistance. So we're making that available as well.
Do we have any sense of how much interest the public will have in this particular set of revisions?
It's hard to gauge at this point in time. What we are hoping is that through the work of our steering committee, which represents all of the city council districts, 1PS, and some of our other boards and commissions, that they will help bring interest to participating in the process. I think as we get a little bit further in the process, once we start to recommend revisions to it, that we'll see that more people will be interested in commenting on what those revisions are. So it's going to be be a lengthy process, and there will be multiple opportunities for the public to give input on the process. The next thing that I have is...
I have a question.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So there'll be a Spanish interpreter there at the event?
That is correct.
Okay, and then also, how soon will you have the Spanish version available?
We should have it by the end of the day today.
Okay.
So we'll send that out to you as well. The next thing, with sadness, we report that committee member Jakeway of the Architectural Advisory Committee needs to take a leave of absence from the AAC due to a family health issue. He does not want to be released from the Architectural Advisory Committee, would like to continue serving, and based on his situation, I think it's appropriate to excuse him for a brief period of time. He anticipates it'll be probably for about 3 months. What I would recommend that we do is that we appoint an alternate to the Architectural Advisory Committee. Per the code, we can appoint up to 2 alternates, but I think for the time being, it would be appropriate to appoint 1. We would need to schedule interviews, and what I would propose is that prior to our next Planning Commission meeting on February the 26th, that we have an early study session to interview applicants for the Architectural Advisory Committee. We could probably start that at noon or at 11:30, give you a bit of a break for lunch. We'd bring lunch in and then start our regular meeting at 1:30 p.m. Would you all be available at 11:30 or noon on February the 26th for AAC interviews?
Anyone not?
Director Flynn,
yeah.
I already told you that I will not be.
Oh, that's right.
I will be absent that day.
Okay, so we have one who will be absent, but for other reasons. So if everyone else is available.
Chair Wormuck is going to be back, correct?
Yes, yeah, she's back on the 20th, so she'll be in attendance. So we'll go ahead and schedule that as a special study session of the Planning Commission, and we'll start either at 11:30 or noon.
What was that date again?
February the 26th, your regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting day. And again, we'll bring in lunch for you so that you don't go hungry. The third thing that I needed to get your input on, as we had discussed at the last meeting, I can send one of the planning commissioners to the National American Planning Association Conference in Houston. Those who do not go, I would be able to offer attendance at the state American Planning Association Conference in September, which will be held in Redlands. So I'll be able to send one of you to Houston and everyone else can go to Redlands, is basically it.
Redlands for sure.
Is there any direction in terms of who would like to go to the Houston conference, who would be available? It's April the 25th through the 28th. Okay.
Well, I've only got 1.5 years. I think it should be someone who's got a longer tenure left on the commission.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
My time expires in June.
Subject to renewal.
You'll be back.
Subject to renewal.
From that side of the room.
Yeah, I'll be attending a meeting already in March. So.
Yeah.
This is April, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this will be April 25th through the 28th.
Oh, you were going to another planning,
Yeah,
like a CEQA or some other discussion?
Yeah, he's going.
Okay, I got you. Well, I guess we're going to miss out on Houston.
Okay.
We could save the money.
That's okay. Again, we will make registration for the September conference in Redlands available to all of the planning commissioners to attend. So there we go. And that's everything that I have for you. And we will see you on the 26th.
In the new schedule starting next month, when would we schedule the study sessions and something like interviews for AAC?
What we would probably do is, much like we've been doing, we would do it the same day as your regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting. We would probably start earlier, break for dinner, and then commence with our regular session at 5:30.
So pizza for everyone, is that what you're saying?
Well, hopefully something a step above pizza.
Commissioner Lewin?
Thank you, Commissioner Maruzzi. I'd like for us in the near future to come up with the plan of how we regularly discuss the general plan update that's going on. I think we need to be well informed, and we need to kind of have it regularly on the agenda. I know it's premature today, but
Actually not. What we will do is once a month, we'll have a report on the general plan update. So at your next meeting on February the 26th, David Newell will give an update at that point in time, as well as we'll have a report from Chair Wormuck representing the steering committee on the work that's been done in the steering committee.
so that brings up a good point. There's reports from staff and the chair, but then there's also dialogue that needs to take place amongst us so that we start, I'm sure all of us have thoughts about what a new general plan might need to include, revolutionary ideas or evolutionary ideas, and where would the space for that general discussion come in?
We will be scheduling study sessions with the Planning Commission to do that so that you have the opportunities to comment. What we anticipate is, based on our first community workshop on February the 24th, we'll need a couple of weeks to kind of filter all that information that we receive and put it in a presentable format so that by the end of March, or our second meeting in March, that would be the appropriate time to have a Planning Commission workshop to review the first set of comments that we're receiving from the public and how that might shape changes to those elements.
And if a commissioner had a couple of passionate items that they would like to see addressed, when would be the right time? Would it be appropriate to talk to staff directly and say, hey, I'm interested in these kinds of things, or do we wait until we have a study session?
I think it would probably be best either in a study session or else as part of the community workshop. You as a citizen may attend and bring those ideas forward. I would recommend those two alternatives rather than talking to staff directly, so it's vetted in an open situation.
Study session or open forum?
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more thoughts, comments before we adjourn? All right, we will adjourn to the meeting of February 26, 2020.
Okay, thank you very much.